Hello again, Bat fans! In this episode we will check out what happened in the Batman comics before the iconic Batman Year 1 storyline. So, as we all know, the Crisis on Infinite Earths just happened and DC Comics wanted to reboot the continuity of all the characters. Because of these, things changed at the DC offices. In 1986, the people in charge of the Batman comics were replaced, and most importantly, Dennis O'Neil became the new Batman editor. If you have watched all episodes of The Bronze Bat, you know how important Mr. O'Neil was when he was writing Batman. Many people, myself included, consider Dennis O'Neil as the best Batman writer ever, so having him become the new Batman editor was just absolutely fantastic. In his run as editor, he proved to be the best Batman creator in history. Really, we should all be thankful for all of Mr. O'Neil's contributions to the Batman mythos. Anyway, O'Neil became the new Batman editor and he was in charge of rebooting the history of Batman, changing things from the past continuity. But the changes at the DC offices happened too fast. When O'Neil became editor, he needed some time to work on the new Batman origin. And to make things harder, the first Detective Comics and Batman issues edited by Dennis O'Neil needed to be part of this massive crossover storyline called Legends. Basically, in this crossover, the people of Earth turn against the heroes and it's all part of Darkseid's plan. Because these crossover needed to showcase these kind of storytelling, the first issues of Detective and Batman edited by O'Neil were not very heavy in continuity. Batman and Robin were not different from the pre-Crisis stories and neither were the villains. In Batman 401, a new villain was introduced. Her name was Magpie, and although she had already appeared in a Superman comic, this was her first appearance in the Batman comics. That said, she was not an interesting character, and her gimmick caused her to fall flat with the readers. The interesting thing about this issue is the characterization of Robin. Jason Todd acted very similar to Dick Grayson, making puns and being joyful. While this light-hearted Jason was normal in pre-Crisis, this was not normal anymore after the reboot happened. But because it hasn't yet, it's a bit strange. The next two issues of Batman were also quite different. O'Neil hired writer Max Allan Collins to write these stories, while he continued developing the new origin of Batman. Collins created a two-part storyline about a man who admired Batman, but who was driven over the edge and started acting as Batman. This Batman impostor gave the real Batman a bad reputation because he killed criminals. By the end of the first part of the story, this man is captured and sent to Arkham, but in the second part he escapes, and by chance he finds the Batcave, which drives him further into his delusion of being Batman. Eventually, the real Batman finds this guy and stops him again, but this time he also tries to help him see the truth, which is a nice act of kindness from Batman. While that storyline is not really impressive or interesting, it showed an unusual side of Batman. Robin also acted a little more reckless, dangerously and without thinking. Now this is more like the post-Crisis Robin. This is important, so remember the name of the writer who made Jason be like this. Max Allan Collins. And finally, Vicky Vale returned in this story, once again as Bruce's romantic interest. In the pre-Crisis stories, things just fell apart between the two of them, but now they are back together. Kinda. And that was all that happened in the Batman comics before Year 1. Now it's time to look at the events of Detective Comics before Year 1. Detective Comics 568 was the first issue of the series edited by O'Neil, and it was also part of the Legends crossover. This story featured the Penguin, but the only interesting part of the whole story is Batman's characterization, thanks to writer Joey Cavalieri, who understood Batman better than most writers do nowadays. After that issue, a new creative team started working on Detective. They were writer Mike W. Barr and artist Alan Davis. We have talked about Mike Barr in the past when we mentioned the comic Batman and the Outsiders, which Mike Barr also did with Alan Davis, so these two creators were already familiar with Batman. In their first issue, they started a storyline featuring the Joker as the main villain. The Madman learns that Catwoman is now working alongside Batman, and so he kidnaps her to experiment with her and make her evil again. After a painful process, Catwoman returns to her criminal ways. Batman and Robin eventually confront the criminals, but while they capture the Joker, Catwoman escapes. That story was Mike Barr and Alan Davis's debut on Detective Comics, and it was pretty good. The story and the art were really impressive, and there are a few Easter eggs in the story, like when Robin uses the holy catchphrase from the 66 TV show, and Batman tells him not to do it again. Mike Barr was known for making Batman more violent than necessary, but in these stories he toned the violence down a little bit, so this Batman was not entirely brutal, except for when he got really mad, which happened once or twice and it was quite scary. There was also the moment when Batman took Robin to a nightclub, which is not precisely a good place for a 12-year-old to be, but that was Mike Barr's style. After that story, the Scarecrow returns to Detective Comics with a new fear toxin, which removes people's fears from them, making them reckless and dangerous. While the heroes try to stop Scarecrow separately, Scarecrow kidnaps Robin and drugs Batman with his new toxin, forcing Batman to rescue the Boy Wonder under the effects of the drug. The reckless Batman almost got himself killed trying to rescue Robin, but in the end he succeeded and Scarecrow was captured. When Robin asked Batman how he managed to overcome the effects of the fearless toxin, Batman explained that he imagined his most terrible fear, which nullified the drug's effect. Although Batman doesn't tell Jason what his worst fear is, we get to see that Batman's greatest fear is the death of Jason at the hands of a criminal. Now, this might look like something normal for a simple Batman story, but when we remember a death in the family, this was a massive foreshadowing, almost a prediction, 2 years before the storyline happened, which is kinda freaky to be honest. The next issue, Detective Comics 572, was a special anniversary issue for the 50 years of the magazine. The comic book featured an extra long story with some of DC's best detectives, like Slam Bradley, Elongated Man, and of course, Batman. But the best surprise of all was when these heroes met the greatest detective of all time, Sherlock Holmes himself. This one is a very nice story, but it gets a little weird when Batman uses a criminal as a human shield when another crook shoots at him, effectively killing the thug. I guess Mike Barr just couldn't keep Batman nice and clean after all. After that story, Mike Barr and Alan Davis used another classic Batman villain when they brought back the Mad Hatter, but there was something strange with that. This Mad Hatter was not the real Jarvis Tetch. If you remember from the last episodes of the Bronze Bat, writer Jerry Conway brought back the original Mad Hatter and explained that the fat man with the mustache was an imposter. That was a really good development, but now the imposter was brought back without much of an explanation. I guess they wanted to bring back this Mad Hatter for good, but we all know it didn't work, and I am glad it didn't, because this Mad Hatter is lame compared to the real one. In any case, this story was quite interesting as well. The Mad Hatter uses head gimmicks, as usual. Robin is very happy and makes a lot of puns, and then there are even giant props, like in the good old Golden and Silver Ages. But the best part of the story is the ending. Batman captures the Mad Hatter, but in the struggle Robin is seriously injured by a bullet from the villain. This event leads directly into the next detective issue, which is the last one before year 1 started. Beginning with the very cover of this issue, we see Batman carrying the body of Jason while walking out of a fire. This is not only very ominous, but it's the most clear foreshadow and prediction to that fateful moment in A Death in the Family. It was almost as if the people in charge of the Batman comics were obsessed with the idea of killing Jason, years before it actually happened. But as we all know, the covers are sometimes exaggerations of what happens in the story. This one is no different. Of course, Jason is not dead, but he was badly injured and Batman takes him to Crime Alley, to the clinic of Leslie Tompkins. Leslie, a bit shocked by the unexpected visit, does her best to save the young boy, and while she works by herself, Batman starts recalling the events of his past. He remembers the night when his parents were murdered and how the killer dropped the gun at the crime scene. He remembers how he grabbed the gun without anyone noticing and took it with him, and then he swore eternal vengeance against all criminals. Because Bruce was left an orphan, Leslie took him as his foster mother, but he was always a problematic kid, getting in fights with the school bullies. When he was old enough to go to college, he dedicated his time to study in order to fight crime, while pretending to be a spoiled rich man. In Batman's memories, we also get to see a small hint of the new origin for Jason as Robin, which happened immediately after year 1. And by the time Leslie is done operating on Robin, she talks to Batman and they come to understand each other. The two of them have to keep doing what they do, because that is their mission in life. Once the two of them are done discussing, they notice that Jason is recovering. Bruce tries to tell him that he doesn't need to be robbing anymore, but Jason is actually eager to get back in action. As you can see, this final issue deals a lot with Batman's past and changes some elements from his origin in previous stories. Even Leslie Thompkins is now different from the pre-crisis version, who was just a frail old lady. The new Leslie is a badass doctor, and it was kinda interesting that they made her Bruce's foster mother. But this was only the beginning, because right after this, the continuity of Batman was rebooted in the iconic Batman Year 1. Now, the most important things you have to remember from all these events prior to Year 1 are the new Batman writer called Max Allan Collins, and also the fact that Bruce took the murder weapon from the killer. Those are important facts for what comes after Year 1. But before we get too ahead, next video is going to be all about Batman Year 1. So if you don't want to miss that, hit that subscribe button for many more Batman videos. Until then, Godspeed, my friends.